Story 1. When I started hearing words from kids, I didn't understand them at all. Story 2. I'm going to the grocery store, and they're playing music from my teenage years. Story 3. Acid reflux caused me to instinctively groan every time I rose from a reclining position. Story 4. When I wake up and realize I have injured myself just from sleeping. Story 5. Time has lost much of its meaning since the pandemic. It felt like 1.5 years instead of nearly 5 years of pandemonium. Story 6. When I'm hanging out with friends who are just out of high school or in college and they suggest something stupid or dangerous, I say maybe that's not a good idea or that sounds dangerous. Then I realized I sounded like my parents. Story 7. Doing absolutely nothing on the weekend is suddenly enjoyable. Story 8. Watching football. I used to cheer for big hits, shouting, "Yeah, take his head off." Now, if someone gets rocked, I think that it is just a kid trying to live out his dream, and I hope he is okay. Story 9. When I started seeing fucking 2016 to 2019 high school aesthetic photos on the internet. Story 10. When the doctor says that a condition is simply something you have now, whereas they used to say, "We'll have you better in no time." Story 11. My vacuum cleaner stopped working, and I thought maybe it was time to get a Roomba. I called my friends to tell them the news. Story 12. When you have to keep scrolling to find your birth year. Story 13. When I realized my doctors and dentists are younger than me. Story 14. As a middle-aged white man, my new superpower was invisibility. Story 15. When I would rather be in bed by 10:30 than getting ready to go out. Story 16. I mentioned the WKRP in Cincinnati turkey drop to someone, and they had no idea what I was talking about. Story 17. When I started waking up at 3 in the morning instead of falling asleep then. Story 18. I realized new songs just sound like noise to me, and I still think music from the 2000s was real music. Story 19. I started telling back in my day stories to explain to kids how it really was. I realized that in the 1980s I thought the 1940s were long ago, so little kids now see the 1980s the same way. My cat's veterinary technician got excited about his name because she took a 20th century literature course and recognized it. She said back in the 1900s the same way I would say back in the 1800s. Story 20. 1.5 years ago, I threw out my back. A couple of months later, my knee buckled while I was climbing a ladder. I then had a stroke and required outpatient heart surgery for hereditary issues that were all connected, including cholesterol medication. Somewhere in all that I broke a rib. My best man passed away, and at least 4 other notable people from different times in my life have died. Lately, I have been helping clean out my parents' house before their situation worsens with age. I noticed that most of my stories begin with 20 years ago. It has been a tough couple of years getting older. Story 21. When I was in college, I learned how to open a beer bottle with a lighter. On my 50th birthday this summer, I used that skill to open a bottle of Topo Chico mineral water with a bottle of ibuprofen. Story 22. I told a guy at work that I played games on consoles, and he replied, "Ah, retro, nice." Story 23. Everything is annoying. Loud sounds, too many people, and all the slang. I even say yeet to my son, and he tells me that was nearly 10 years ago. I am ready to tell people to get off my lawn. Story 24. When a simple injury takes 2 to 3 times longer to heal in your 40s. Story 25. In line at the pharmacy. An older man ahead of me gives his date of birth to the clerk. He is 5 years younger than I am. Story 26. Classic rock is now the music I grew up with, not my parents. Story 27. I hurt my back just getting out of bed. When I need to bend over to pick something up, I am careful about how I do it. Story 28. When I became genuinely excited about buying a good vacuum, I knew something had shifted. Story 29. When trying to reach the top shelf in the kitchen cabinets, I can no longer jump onto counters and back down gracefully. Story 30. When I realized I couldn't lie in bed for fun anymore without my body hating me, I began using my bed only for sleep. Then I get up and start moving. Story 31. I saw younger people wearing t-shirts in October while I was cold in a jacket. Story 32. I remarked recently without thinking that the police all look young now. I meant that they are younger than me. Story 33. Making pop culture references that no one else understood. Story 34. When I realized we could no longer move furniture in and out of a house by ourselves. Story 35. I realized it when I no longer recognized the country I grew up in. It was not nostalgia speaking. It was grief, that quiet, suffocating kind that settles in when you realize the place that shaped you no longer exists. I knew then I was old not because of time, but because the world had moved on and left something uglier in its place. Story 36. When I started talking about events from 20 years ago, I realized they occurred when I was an adult. Story 37. Feeling miserably sore for days after a simple game of volleyball or a similar activity. Story 38. My 10-year plans put me in my mid-50s, but I still have a hard time imagining reaching that age and I do not like it. Story 39. My partner left me. Before the shock had worn off and while I thought I was fine, I installed a couple of dating apps, which I have since deleted. All the men my age and a bit older seem so old. Story 40. When I get up from the couch, I sound like I'm doing squats. When I sit down, I moan. Story 41. I heard that there will be a special screening celebrating the several-decade anniversary of a favorite movie from my late teens. Story 42. I was offered the Tuesday discount at the grocery store. Story 43. When I started caring about retirement and life insurance. Story 44. I realized I was old enough to have an adult child. I am 38 and could easily have an 18 to 20-year-old child. Story 45. Teenagers give blank stares when you mention anything that occurred in the 20th century. Story 46. When the weather changes, I get aches. I always thought it was an old wives' tale, but it is actually true. Story 47. When an irritating behavior prompts you to say those magical words for the first time. This generation. Story 48. My nephew kept saying, 6'7". And I thought he was special until I realized it is a meme going around among the younger generation. Also back pain. Yes, I feel it. Now where did I put my walker? Story 49. Sometimes the sight of a group of unsupervised teenagers in public spaces bothers me. Story 50. I was in a head-on collision at age 60 and needed back surgery. I suddenly felt like I had gone from age 33 to age 62. That was 6 years ago, and now I feel like I am back to 49. Story 51. While discussing music, direct quote from my son. I like the old rock too. Like Linkin Park before the female singer, and Nirvana. Old rock and Nirvana. I had to lie down. Story 52. I began to wonder whether people I knew in childhood were still alive, and I would not be surprised if they were not. Story 53. I sleep in a normal bed, but suddenly I wake up every day feeling like I slept on rocks. Story 54. I realized that almost every professional athlete is younger than I am. Story 55. I was singing along to a Boys II Men song, but my coworkers had never heard of them. Story 56. Seeing athletes I watched start out as rookies retire. Story 57. I went to a coworker's baby shower. I had beautiful high heels that I rarely wore, so I put them on for the occasion. The venue was not far, so I walked there. On the way, I felt a tug in my knee but did not pay much attention to it. After I went home, the next day my whole knee was swollen and I had apparently sprained it. I had done nothing except walk in very high heels, the way I have been wearing them since I was 16 or 17. Yes, it was a wake-up call, laughing out loud. Story 58. The first time I stood up too fast and my knee made that crunching noise, I knew the glory days were gone. Story 59. Last night, while working at my new job at Love's, the young man who works at the subway asked, "Do you like it?" I replied, "What does that mean?" He laughed and clarified, "Do you like working here?" I said, "I'm getting old, and I don't know the lingo anymore." Story 60. It hit me the day I made a weird noise just standing up. Not even after a workout or anything heroic, simply standing. Story 61. When people started stopping and holding the door for me. Story 62. 1. Joint pain and muscle stiffness linger uncomfortably if I do not stretch properly before starting my day. 2. I have to use a search engine to find the top 5 shows of 2025 to learn which show is most popular right now. 3. Hangovers now last almost an entire day before they go away. 4. I need to go to bed early to avoid feeling like I am falling apart the next day, but I still cannot sleep for more than a few hours. 5. When I play the Foo Fighters on a jukebox in a bar, music venue, or restaurant, a younger patron immediately puts coins in the machine and changes the song to an electronic dance music dubstep remix I have never heard of. 6. When I drive, podcasts on Bluetooth car audio and talk radio on frequency modulation occupy most of the background noise, more than Spotify playlists or music radio. Story 63. I used to be much more adaptable. I learned new things more easily, picked up new skills faster, and I did not notice weather changes as much. These days, it is often uncertain whether an injury will heal well. Story 64. When I go into a room to get something, I often forget what I went in there for. Story 65. I realize that people who appear visibly younger than I am are no longer teen parents, even if they have children. Story 66. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and severe hip arthritis in the same year. I'm in my mid-40s and honestly a pretty healthy dude. Story 67. When I look in the mirror and see signs of aging, or when I look at a young person's smooth, unlined skin, I notice the difference. Story 68. I am no longer part of a large group of friends. I do not attend multiple weddings, go out on weekends, or have regular get-togethers because everyone is married and has children now. Story 69. Hearing Green Day, Weezer, Pearl Jam, and Linkin Park on a classic rock station. Story 70. A friend lamented that a coworker had asked her for help with a history project. My friend, a history buff, got excited but quickly realized the coworker was asking what she remembered about the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001, since the coworker had not been born yet. Story 71. Change your mindset. Shoes get old. Cars get old. Things in general get old. People age. Things happen with time. Don't call yourself old. Children, don't call your parents old. Old describes a coin collection or the Fender guitar your grandfather gave you. People become elderly and more dignified. When others put us down and tell us we're old and we give in to that mindset, we might as well sit in a chair and not move for the rest of our lives. I am not old. I am young, vibrant, and ready to see the world. If I die tomorrow, I will die happy because I am the daughter of King Jesus. Story 72. When the new guy at work asked what it was like to live in the 1900s, I did not know how to answer. Story 73. When I realized I'd rather stay home than drive at night. Story 74. I have to take off my glasses to read my phone. I'm nearsighted. Story 75. I was joking with coworkers my age that younger people today have probably never heard of, let alone used, a Thomas guide when they surprised me by asking what it was. Story 76. When my eyebrows stopped growing, wait. My reading vision is not just about reading. My eyebrows have been growing back on my chin. Story 77. I realize that when I do things or visit places, it may well be the last time. Story 78. In my 20s, I could work a physical job during its busy season, go out drinking, and work while hungover with little problem. Now I am in my early 30s. After a few hard days, I prefer a couple of beers, the couch, and being in bed by 10 p.m. Story 79. I turned on the Jetsons today and the mom says, I'm only 33. And I don't know why, but that made me feel old. Story 80. I roar as if charging into battle while bending down to pick something up. Story 81. I have little patience for stupidity. Clouds used to look like puppies. Now they look like a bunch of bullshit. Story 82. My favorite 1980s songs are being used in television advertisements, especially prescription medication advertisements. Story 83. I realized that my friend's parents are old enough to die. Story 84. I am not that old. I am in my late 20s, but I started working as a substitute teacher at 18 and continued until I was 23. Everyone I taught in middle and high school has now graduated. Sometimes adults say hello to me and I do not recognize them because the last time I saw them they were about 10. Story 85. Social energy and desire dropped to 5 to 10% of their former levels over a few years. Story 86. I went from no glasses to progressive lenses and love being able to see. Story 87. I've realized my favorite action movie stars are all seniors now. The line, "I'll be back," now means he needed a nap. Story 88. When wine betrayed me, I realized I loved it. Cannot tolerate it anymore. Story 89. When Prince died, the kids who worked for me did not know who he was and had never heard Purple Rain or When Doves Cry. Story 90. When my 12-year-old called me a boomer for not knowing how to open the browser on his Xbox. Story 91. Working with and befriending coworkers who were born the same year you graduated from high school. Story 92. I used to be the youngest person at work, but now more and more coworkers are younger than me. Feels strange. Story 93. I turned 35 and immediately began breaking my teeth one after another while eating normally. I needed 3 crowns within 18 months. Story 94. I played hopscotch with my daughter and had sore knees for a week afterward. Story 95. I sometimes wake in the middle of the night for no reason and cannot fall back asleep immediately. It can happen more than once. I now usually pick up my ebook reader and read until I feel sleepy again, instead of tossing and turning for an hour or so. Story 96. I was talking to an 18-year-old and realized I was too old for her. Story 97. When the song "Everybody Hurts" took on a whole new meaning. Story 98. Even as I got older, I could relate to younger people and they thought I was cool. Lately I have felt that sometimes I am trying too hard and there is that "what the hell is he saying" vibe, but I do not care. I know I am cool. Story 99. Gray hair and the inability to get by on fewer than 8 hours of sleep. Story 100. I am old, but I do not agree that music is getting better. Story 101. 2 examples. Getting excited about buying tea towels, and having a photograph of the bin timetable saved to my favorites. Story 102. The other day, a kid submitted a screenshot from his phone of a resume generated by a generative pre-trained transformer chat model with his job application. It was the first time I felt genuine concern for the younger generation. Story 103. When I looked in the mirror, my father stared back at me. Story 104. Having to get up to urinate almost every night of the week leads to a poor night's sleep. Story 105. When I tried to swat a hair off my earlobe, I realized it was growing there. Story 106. My favorite childhood games are turning 25 next year. I am the only person from my high school class who is neither married nor regularly having casual sex. Story 107. We just went to my husband's 20-year high school reunion. Saying that makes my back hurt. Story 108. I didn't like any of the new music coming out. It all sounded the same, as if the artists had a bellyache. Story 109. The bills just wouldn't stop piling up. Why am I paying for wireless internet? Story 110. I am 29 and having the "oh god I am 30 next year" crisis, so I am extra tetchy about getting older at the moment. I have noticed I am starting to fall out of the loop with what is down with the kids, like all the 67 and brain rot stuff. I do not have children nor do I know anyone who has any, so I am completely out of the loop. I remember when my generation led the way with memes and whatnot. Story 111. I threw my back out putting on a shirt. I did it again today while sweeping the balcony. Story 112. I had to start stretching after waking up just to be able to walk as if I were not an old man. Story 113. My friends and I were at a bar and complained the entire time about how loud the music was. Story 114. The oldies radio station started playing 80s and 90s music. Story 115. I could not hear the grandfather clock chime from our bedroom at night. Story 116. Everyone, when I have a minor ache in my chest, my first thought is, well, guess that's it for old. Insert my name. Story 117. When I have a random day off and see many other people out and about, I wonder why they are not at work and why the children are not in school. Story 118. When at a party, I look at my phone or watch to tell my partner that we should go home early. around 8 in the evening. Story 119. I've been doing estate planning to determine how to distribute the wealth I spent my life building and have not yet had a chance to use. Story 120. I think I was probably around 40. I am 51 years old now. My old high school campus is bisected by a busy street with a crosswalk. I was sitting at the light watching dozens of high school students cross and heard myself say, Jesus, what the hell are these kids wearing these days? That was my moment. Story 121. One day my hangovers became a 3-day affair. If I drink a case of beer or a bottle of whiskey in one night, my whole body aches like never before. Cannot think or move. I am confined to the couch for a day and a half. Story 122. All the baseball players I'm cheering for are younger than me. Story 123. All the hot actresses are at least 10 years younger. Story 124. Snapchat's popularity. Do you send pictures that disappear? Story 125. My young son took up skateboarding. I skated many years ago. I tried to ollie a curb and landed on my arm. I am not sure if anything broke, but I still cannot bench press. This happened about 6 months ago. My entire arm was bruised and purple, and my wife still makes fun of me, laughing out loud. Story 126. I have a knee that predicts the weather. I can wake up and say, it's going to rain today. That's just dumb. Story 127. All of a sudden, I'm aware of what-if injuries. That is, I have a loft and store extra paper towels and toilet paper, and I thought, God, it would be awful if I missed a step and fell. I've never had that kind of thought before. Also, the wrinkles. There's no future in aging. Story 128. Ugly purple bruises on my forearms from just bumping into something. Story 129. I realized I could become a grandmother at 40 with no teen pregnancies. Story 130. South Park had episodes about Labubus and 6 to 7. I had never heard of either. We do not have a single source for what is popular anymore. No television and no radio. It is all TikTok and Spotify, and you more or less choose what you want to consume. Story 131. When I got up from a sitting or crouching position, I would hear something pop. I could no longer wear stiletto heels for hours without severe foot pain. Story 132. When I learned that I had outlived 50% of the people born in my year so far. Story 133. When someone mentioned they loved collecting retro games like PlayStation 2 and Nintendo GameCube, I crumbled to dust. Story 134. When I learned that, for the year I was born, I had already outlived 50% of the people born that year. Story 135. 2 friends and I were backpacking in the High Sierra in California. Dan and I had hiked the same trail twice before with no problems. It starts around 8,000 feet, 2,440 meters, and climbs to a pass at 11,400 feet, 3,480 meters, in about 8 miles. This time, however, by 9,000 feet we were all quite tired and took a long break. We continued, and within another mile we were ready to stop. But the canyon was very narrow and offered no camping spots. We pressed on, searching for campsites at every step. By 10,000 feet we were nearly exhausted, one of us more than the others. He threw off his pack and was going to camp right in the trail, which is not allowed. I volunteered to scout ahead for a campsite. About 1/3 of a mile farther, at about 10,300 feet, I found a nice area next to a beautiful lake. I left my pack and went back to get my friends. We were moving on shaky legs. It took a long time to set up camp, fix dinner, pump water, and clean the cooking gear. We were in bed before dark and slept like logs. For the rest of the week we were fine, but the trip highlighted my aging. I was 71. I returned to the same place last month. We took a much easier pace, but I was still exhausted. That was probably the last time I will ever backpack above 7,000 or 8,000 feet. I am 79. Story 136. At my job, I called a teenage busboy buddy as if I were talking to a small child. Story 137. When I watch people I went to high school with have children or get divorced. Story 138. I went to Lollapalooza. I was 28 or 29 at the time. I could not believe how many people were drunk and high. I kept thinking, Oh my God. I hope I do not get a contact high and have to get tested at work on Monday. Story 139. When I woke up one morning, I looked like Gandalf the White, although it did not happen that quickly. Story 140. I have gray hair and people think I look 34 when in reality I am 24. Story 141. I went to a group exercise class at my gym. Movements that had been easy suddenly were not. My body no longer wanted to do certain moves. I did not feel as strong or buoyant. My fascia and joints felt different. I could not bend or jump as well. Story 142. When I realized I was in my 30s and did not have a degree or a career. Story 143. I stopped drinking alcohol because I could not tolerate it anymore. And now I go to bed early. Story 144. My young neighbor saw me and exclaimed, "Ah, look at you in your cute mini skirt." She made me feel like a cute rebel old lady, and I'll take it. She was fascinated by what I wore back in the day. Story 145. I had a birthday, but the number on the cake was larger than it was last time. Story 146. It dawned on me that I was starting to accumulate more moments of remembering the last time I did something and fewer moments of experiencing something for the first time. Story 147. When you see someone land from a jump and you can feel it in your knees. Story 148. When I start to sneeze, I have to decide whether I am going to direct the force to my shoulder, my lower back, or urinate a little. Story 149. I saw a post recently about a Reddit user who was 9 during the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic asking whether it was that bad. It was bad. They could be 15 now. Story 150. This weekend, I bought my first multi-pack of travel-size Kleenex tissues. I put one in my laptop bag, gym bag, car, and pickleball bag. To me, this felt like the peak of getting older. I am in my mid-30s, by the way. Story 151. Referring to watching a movie without subtitles as raw-dogging it. Story 152. My parents are shrinking and sleeping all day, and many of their siblings are dying or near death. Story 153. When I got shingles, I had to take 2 weeks off work, using what little sick time and all remaining paid time off I had. I had low-coverage health insurance that would not have covered the costs, but a relative diagnosed me remotely, prescribed medications, and recommended a free discount prescription program. The situation made me realize I'm reaching the age when adult health issues begin, and that I've treated my career like I was younger for too long. I am not in a position to afford getting sick. Story 154. I was barely 30 myself, but the police officer who pulled you over was obviously younger than you were. Story 155. I like to watch a guy on YouTube called Tommy NFG. He recently made a video called The Ending of Generation Z's Era. In the first few seconds of the video, this was the transcript, word for word. Person 1. Hey, what's your favorite cartoon? Person 2. YouTube. I watch YouTube. Person 1. No, a cartoon. Cartoons. Person 2. Cartoon? Person 1. You don't watch cartoons? Person 2. What are cartoons? Person 1. Mann, what? I'm not that old. Person 2. Is it like when they have ads? Person 1. What? You've never seen Tom and Jerry? Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Hey Arnold. You've never seen Max and Ruby? Person 2. Nope. I'm fairly sure this was only a joke or satire. It's pretty funny, in my opinion. But if, in the future, this really becomes the way kids speak, I will honestly feel very old. This comes from someone who recently turned 19. Story 156. I wake up early no matter what. Every year something new aches from something I did as a teenager. I go to bed early but cannot fall asleep for hours. A positive note to end on. I feel like I have finally made it. With 3 kids, a great wife, a beautiful home, and a good career instead of spending every weekend at a bar. Story 157. Excited to go to Barnes & Noble today? I was disappointed that they did not have any interesting technical books. Story 158. Someone saw me standing on a bus and offered me their seat. I'm 65 and in great health. Story 159. The writing on packaging and restaurant menus now seems very small. Thank goodness for the magnifier on my phone. Story 160. when I really started listening to Medicare Part B plan commercials. Story 161. I've had random pain starting at 34 years old. 3 times now my right calf has ached for no apparent reason. Bollocks. Story 162. I see children outside, and I have no idea whether they are in high school or have graduated from college. Story 163. I realized the recovery time from the injury was longer than I expected. I fell on my shoulder while trying to catch my child who was tripping on tile. I could not lift my arm above my shoulder without pain for almost 3 weeks. Story 164. I finally understand why my mom would fall asleep when I asked if we could get fast food on the way home. She needed to get home as soon as possible. Life is exhausting. Story 165. I am starting to need more recovery time for minor injuries. What used to heal in hours now takes a couple of days. Story 166. The playlists at the supermarket and some restaurants are amazing. Also, my joints, back, and head hurt all the time. Story 167. When I work with people from Generation Z, they do not understand any of my 1990s references, and I do not understand much of what they talk about. I then realized they were not even born when September 11, 2001 occurred, yet they are now adults. Story 168. I gave a teenager the stink eye in Target today because he was being obnoxious, and I realized I am the grumpy old man I was always destined to be. Story 169. It started with the vacuum aisle at Lowe's, when first impressions began to matter. Then the lawnmower and appliance sections followed. The things I used to ignore started to feel important. Now I am at the stage where it is all about pillows, mattresses, and the small comforts that make an older body feel better. What comes next? Probably thoughts about where my ashes will go, how I will be remembered, and perhaps my will. I just hope that through it all I never lose the childlike happiness inside me. May none of it ever beat that part down. Story 170. I am buying a higher-end car for quieter road noise, so I can hear other people better. Story 171. I realized I'm older than the characters on Cheers and the parents on Family Ties. Story 172. I realized some of my coworkers had not yet been born when I joined the company. Story 173. Being called sir instead of young man still irks me. Story 174. I had to search for the new slang. The 67 meme sealed the deal because I am completely lost on that one. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.